So sympatric or same country speciation. This is when the speciation takes place in geographically overlapping populations. The mechanisms of this type of speciation include chromosomal changes and non-random mating, and that both of those reduce the gene flow that we've been talking about. Now I know it seems like we've talked about polyploidy a lot, but this just helps understand. So extra sets of chromosomes that are mutational changes result in polyploidy, and we've gone over that in other past chapters. But an autopolyploidy is an individual that has more than 2 chromosome sets that are all derived from a single species. So failure in cell division can double a cell's chromosome number, so it can go from a diploid to a tetraploid, so 2n to 4n. And this means that in just one generation, autoploidy can isolate a generation without actual geographic separation. Various mechanisms can change a sterile hybrid into a fertile polyploidy, known as an allopolyploidy, and they are fertile with each other but cannot interbreed with either of the parental species, so like they can mate with other allopolyploidies. Reproductive isolation can occur when the genetic factors enable a subpopulation to exploit resources that weren't used by the parent population, and that's the habitat differentiation. An experiment was performed, and it asked the question: does sexual selection in cichlids, which is a type of cichlids, which is a type of fish, result in reproductive isolation? And actually, I'm going to use this part of the board. So just if I can see. So there was no really good picture, so I'm just going to draw it out. But what they did was they had 2 different species of cichlid. They're too bright.
No, you can see it.
Okay. So in the experiment, they used 2 different species of the cichlid. Each of them had distinct colors, different colors. And what they did was they first shined the 2 cichlids under a normal light so that their colors could be like distinguished. And then they shined it under a monochromatic orange light so that they appeared that they were the same color. And they wanted to see if that would like kind of change the mating choices of the fish in the tanks. And what they found was that under the normal light, the females of each species would only mate with the male of their own species. But under this orange light that made them appear the same color, the females of each species had no preference. They mated with either. And the resulting hybrids were viable and fertile. So the researchers had concluded that mate choice by females based on coloration is the main reproductive barrier that normally keeps the gene pools of these 2 different species separate. But since the species can still interbreed, this prezygotic behavioral barrier was breached in this laboratory. The genetic difference between the 2 species is likely to be small, and that suggests that this speciation in nature has occurred relatively recently.
Hybrid zones? Hybrid zone is a region in which members of different species meet and mate, producing at least some offspring of mixed ancestry. And these hybrid zones exhibit a variety of structures, such as a narrow band, which I'm going to draw this way. example of this narrow band would be fire-bellied and yellow-bellied toads in the genus Bombina, or the species. This would be what the hybrid zone would look like. This is where the yellow-bellied and the fire-bellied like meet and mate or whatever and form hybrids. The zone spans about like 4,000 kilometers, but the hybrid zone can only be like 10 kilometers thick, but it can be 4,000 kilometers long. And across a given slice of this hybrid zone, or the whole thing, the alleles of yellow-bellied toads drops from 100 in this region, so 100% here, to 50% yellow-bellied like alleles down to 0%. This is because the 50% region, it's shared between the yellow-bellied and the fire-bellied, and then there's no yellow-bellied over here, so there's 0 like alleles from the yellow-bellied. The causes of this frequency pattern are geographic barriers and increased rates of embryonic mortality and a variety of morphological abnormalities, which cause them not to live through, or not to live long enough to reproduce. And then as a result of the hybrid's poor survival rate, they rarely serve as a stepping stone for which alleles are passed from one species to another. Other hybrid zones have more complicated patterns, such as the hybrid zone between the ground crickets Alanomobius fasciatus and Alanomobius socius, and these are found in the Appalachian Mountains, where there's like high peaks and low peaks. In this case, the environment, as I was saying, has powerful impact of the fitness. The Alanomobius fasciatus is more successful than the Alanomobius socius in colder portions or the higher altitudes, and then it's reversed for the socius. The topography, obviously, of this hybrid zone is complex, having many high and low points, and then there are many areas where the two species are closely interspersed, so they are mating with the other species a lot. And unlike the toads, the fitness of the hybrids varies from year to year and sometimes exceeds that of both the parents, allowing them to live in both the high and low areas. In hybrid zones over time, there are 3 possible outcomes. Reinforcement, which is the strengthening of reproductive barriers, fusion, which is the weakening of reproductive barriers, and stability, which is continued breeding between the two species. For reinforcement, when hybrids are less fit than members of their parent species, natural selection is expected to strengthen the pre-zygotic barriers, such in Bombina, but it doesn't really work in Bombina. It's kind of like, I'll explain that later. But the barriers to reproduction between species are stronger for sympatric than allopatric. But because in sympatric, both the species, such as yellow-bellied or fire-bellied, it doesn't have them. Actually, I'll use European flycatchers, the pied and collared flycatchers. Male pied flycatchers are a dull brown color, and then the male collared flycatchers have enlarged patches of white. So in sympatric species, the females do not select males from the other species because they can see both of them in the same area. But in allopatric species, they make mistakes more often because there's less of the pied flycatchers. Fusion occurs when the barriers to reproduction are not strong. So much gene flow may occur and further weakens reproductive barriers. In the gene pools, the species become increasingly alike. And then stability. Many hybrid zones are stable in the sense that hybrids continue to be produced, such as in Bombina or